Today.com. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning, McGraw. How are you?
Interesting that Eric Greitens dropped that line in the sand on Facebook, dropped the mic and walked away and didn't say anything. Does this mean he has the power to stop the MLS stadium from getting some type of state funding?
Well, yes and no, and you make an interesting point in that I hope this doesn't become the governor's modus operandi, and that is make an explosive statement that serves a political purpose and then don't answer any questions, so there's no context and nobody has any actual understanding as to what's going on. So the governor yesterday issued a statement saying that he's opposed to public subsidy for the soccer stadium, that it's amounts to welfare for millionaires, which a lot of people, both conservative and liberal, share that philosophy. If you look at my Twitter timeline yesterday, there were more progressive-type liberal folks that were agreeing with and retweeting Eric Greitens than there were conservatives. So it's interesting where that political philosophy is resonating with people. But it's quite possible that Governor Eric Greitens, when he's the governor, will have very little to do with this subsidy, because there is a vote scheduled today in the Missouri Development Finance Board to award at least $20 million in state funding to the proposed soccer stadium that would be contingent upon the vote in the city of St. Louis. And if that vote goes forward, there is likely nothing the governor can do. The governor, when he comes in, will reappoint the Development Finance Board, will take over control. There isn't, to the best of my knowledge, a precedent for going back and undoing a previous award of tax credits. That could have a deleterious effect on the state's credit rating and that sort of thing, because people make, investors make decisions based on these awarding of tax credits. So if the $20 million is awarded today, then I don't think the governor is likely to have an impact on that. The question is, does he then block the next $20 million that would be sought after the vote in the city, if the vote goes through? I think the more powerful place where the governor has an effect on this thing is governors naturally have a bully pulpit. When governors say things like this, it has an effect on the conversation, it has an effect on the political atmosphere, and so I think the governor coming out so strongly and sort of out of the blue could have an effect on the campaign for getting this proposal through both the Board of Aldermen and then, if that happens, the public vote, because it just sort of changes the dynamics.
No question that when he speaks, people listen, and he threw his own wrench into the mix, and we'll see where all that comes. But going forward, he gets the best of both worlds, right? He can't stop this deal from going through, but he throws down the gauntlet. But going forward, if this is his stance, no more corporate welfare for millionaires, there's a lot of deals to be happening in the next 4 years in which we'll go through with quote-unquote corporate welfare for millionaires, in which he will be able to stop, but will he going forward?
That's the question, and that's where I think his statement may come back to haunt him. It depends on how firm he wants to be on this issue. I tried to talk to Governor-elect Greitens about this issue during the election, because he campaigned on this idea, specifically cutting back in some of the biggest tax programs that the state of Missouri has, the two biggest being historic tax credits and low-income tax credits, both which are used significantly by developers in the St. Louis region. And he campaigned on cutting back on those. And when I tried to ask him about other corporate welfare programs, i.e. tax credits to Boeing, tax credits to Ford, tax credits to other big companies that claim to be bringing jobs in and needing a subsidy, I didn't get clear answers. I'm not exactly sure where he stands on those. And so when you start talking about welfare for millionaires and you draw a line in the sand, you have to be careful about that politically because, as you noted, this state is in welfare for millionaires business. Republicans campaigned over the last few years on corporate tax cuts, which is, in a lot of ways, welfare for millionaires. And so it's a position that puts the governor in a position in which he may have to backtrack a little bit. He may have to walk some things back if he finds himself realizing that some of these programs do actually produce jobs.
Yeah, you're either all for it or all against it. And if you pick and choose, well, then you create all sorts of trouble because why did you give it to A and B but not C and D? And
Governor Nixon had this exact same problem.
Yes.
Governor Nixon railed against the same sorts of tax credit programs early on in his tenure that Eric Greitens railed against in his campaign. But then by midway through his tenure, he was giving away some of the biggest corporate welfare programs in the state's history, specifically the tax credits given to both Ford and Boeing.
Tony,
the governor would say, and there may be some evidence to this, that those programs did produce jobs and did improve the economy in Missouri.
Right. Do you find it interesting that Governor Nixon tweets out that it's not wheeling and dealing, backroom wheeling and dealing when it goes to a public vote? He should know about wheeling and dealing. He wanted the football stadium without a public vote.
Yeah, I found that tweet a little bit empty when you consider that the governor was behind the Rams deal that absolutely was wheeling and dealing and done in secrecy and ended up backfiring. I do think that there is some difference in how the soccer process is being handled, but there's no doubt that part of those negotiations have been done in secret, and there's also no doubt that they have said that they are committed to a public vote, and so far they appear to be, and that makes the way that this process has been handled at least somewhat different than the Rams process. But the problem is the Rams process happened, and it's fresh in everybody's memory, and I think that affects the entire discussion around the MLS stadium, and I think politically and smartly, Eric Greitens is taking advantage of that situation.
Tony Messenger, we'll talk to you Thursday, but have a good week. Thanks for checking in.
Sounds good.
All right.
You too. Thanks.
STLtoday.com columnist, KTRS contributor, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 8:30.